Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing well, staying apart while keeping together. I'm Sarah Conley, the Conservation Coordinator for the International Elephant Foundation. And our next guest for our Ask a Conservation series is Ravi Corea, founder and president of the Sri Lanka Wildlife Conservation Society. They work to build a new paradigm for sustainable conservation that balances ecosystem protection and economic development in Sri Lanka. Ravi and his work have won multiple awards, including the UNDP Equator Initiative Prize in 2008, the Google Geo Challenge Award in 2009, the Whitley Award for Nature in 2010, and the American Chamber of Commerce in Sri Lanka has named his organization Charity of the Year. We are so honored to have Ravi here with us. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. That was a nice intro. I hope I can live up to it.
So why don't we jump right in? Let's lay some groundwork. Why don't you tell us a little bit about elephants in Sri Lanka, the population numbers, how they are viewed culturally by the people and by the government, and what you see sort of as their biggest threat to their conservation?
The elephants in Sri Lanka, of course, what is unique is that a small island like Sri Lanka, which is like half the size of England, to give sort of a reference here, or size of Ireland, or the state of West Virginia, has naturally an elephant population living in the island. And the connections of the elephant to the people culturally has survived even now. So elephants still continue to play a very significant role in our cultural traditions, and especially in regard to religious activities. And Sri Lanka is a predominantly Buddhist country, and even in Buddhism, the elephant has a very significant position, and is regarded, in fact, as the second best animal to be reincarnated as. If you cannot be reincarnated as a human being in your cycles of rebirth, then the second best other sentient animal to be to be reborn as would be an elephant, because even at that time people had a very good idea of the elephant's intelligence, its social behaviors, and in fact its ingenuity, and all that people were very much aware of. Over the past, I would say, 50 years, 50 to 70 years, is this increasing and intensifying human-elephant conflict. And this is, of course, as a result that Sri Lanka is an island nation, which is about 25,000 square miles, and has the second largest Asian elephant population in the island. And we have a human population that is comparable to Australia, 21 million people. So it creates a situation where, elephants, people are on a day-to-day basis being more and more being brought into a situation where they are intruding on each other's lives, so to speak. So to deal with the expanding human population, successive governments over the course of nearly 70 odd years have embarked on a development program to make the country self-sufficient in food, resolve the homeless and the landless issues, as well as develop the country's hydropower capability. So when you look at a map, even in today, if you look at a map of Sri Lanka, you see that many of our national parks are in the lowlands, very few are in the highlands. Now we have most of our elephants in the dry zone, but dry zone again, with getting our independence from the British, became the target for development, because that's where the earlier historical development had been, the vast, fields of rice and, agriculture, the cities, the towns, they were all in the dry zone. And obviously, the governments that came into being after independence saw that as the focal area, invest the country's development efforts. And then again, you see this And as a result, vast areas were opened up for human settlement and irrigation projects and hydropower projects as well. And this process is still ongoing. So that means since 1948 until up to now, which is like nearly 70 odd years, we have seen a massive decrease in elephant habitat. And at the same time, we are also seeing a population growth in the elephants as well. The current estimate is that we have about 6,000 plus elephants in the island. One of the biggest challenges for their survival and for the conservation efforts as well as their management is this human-elephant conflicts, because now it has escalated to a level that on average we lose about 250 elephants every year. Now I wouldn't say all 250 are killed as the result of conflict, but it's safe to assume that at least 90% of these elephants die as a result of conflict. So anyway, 250 elephants die on average, and about 100 people die or killed by elephants as a result of conflict. The biggest driving factor for this conflict is the focus on agriculture, like opening up land for settlement. And of course, it goes hand in glove with the agriculture settlements, the need to provide irrigated water, irrigation. So that leads to building more large reservoirs, harnessing the water from various rivers at all levels of government. So, from top to bottom, has completely disregarded the fact that we have elephants in the island and that, we need to make allowances for them. We need to take them into consideration of our development agenda. Not only the elephants, but we also need to give equal weight to all our other fauna and flora, because it's our natural wealth that makes Sri Lanka unique to anyone who comes to the island, including, irrespective of how unique people who to outsiders it is still unique to us, people of the country. We still find it's amazing that in this small island that we have all this, natural wealth, natural resources, all this wildlife, all this amazing, geographic locations, terrain. And in fact, Sri Lanka has been considered to be a continent in an island. It's so much diverse when it comes to its, features for such a small land area. It ranges from coral reefs to mountains with cloud forest. And I think the only climatic condition that we are missing is we don't have snow. Other than that, we represent every other climatic, microclimatic habitat or ecosystem that's found anywhere else. Sri Lanka is considered one of the biodiversity hotspots in the world. So that's tremendous, diversity in a small land area. A paradigm shift of how we approach our development can resolve many of that conflict issues. And the other factor in this is that this agricultural development goal, this development process, it's not really development, because many of the people who are settled really are able to, economically be affluent. In many cases, giving these people 2 acres of land keeps them more marginalized than giving them the resources to come out of, social and economic marginalization. Because now they are trapped in that 2 acres, sometimes in an area where it's not even possible to cultivate anything, right? Trying to eke out a living. And then it's like they're caught in this eternal death cycle, in this lifestyle that there's no way out. But this is the tragedy of it, that, if it really helping these people to, economically stand up, develop, become affluent, then that's a different story. But it's not the case. In many of the areas where human-elephant conflict is very intense, you'll find the people live in a very economic depressed environment, majority of them.
Is that what brought you to found the Sri Lanka Wildlife Conservation Society? Let's talk about the work that you guys are doing to address these issues that you raised.
I have always been, fascinated by animals and nature as far back as I can think, so, and then this fascination as I grew turned into, when I started reading, and I was a voracious reader, when I learned about conservation, that was something I really got interested in. Also the fact that you could take, very definite concrete steps to, protect them, safeguard them. And so it really had a resonance inside me. And I immediately sort of latched on to that idea of being a conservationist. And then, of course, I started to learn about other organizations out there. And of course, the local ones I joined immediately, like the YZA and the Wildlife and Nature Protection Society. Then there was the Natural History Society. So, and as I said, they were the only three that were there at the time. And then subsequently others formed up. And then, of course, as I also kept growing up, I eventually held office in some of these organizations. So one of the things at the time was all of these organizations were based in the city, in Colombo. So the membership, as well as the society's operations, their functions and events were all very Colombo based. But their focuses were elsewhere, in regard to, of course, where the wildlife was. But I would say at that time, none of them operated where the wildlife was or where the conservation challenges were. I mean, we would go on excursions and field visits and, look at stuff, have all these plans and come back. And, many of them would just sizzle out and, and then we'd move on to the next issue. And so it sort of slowly dawned on me that the way we were going, that there was a very important element was missing in our conservation focus, which is actually the fact that, we are in Colombo, we are in the city, and most of these conservation challenges happened elsewhere. The main reason to have a conservation challenge was because of the people in the area. They were the drivers, right? And sort of our planning or our thinking, these people are not part of that. They were not part of the thinking process at the time. Oh, we should go and reach out to these people, bring them also into the loop. They should be part of the equation of whatever measure we are going to, implement or we are going to develop. And then in 95, because early on I realized, as I said, that these things were very essential. I mean, we had to work with the local communities if we are to, achieve any kind of conservation success. Now this can be easily observed with the situation, with the ivory crisis in Africa now, right? We have how much of resources are being expended there by international body of organizations and people, right? To stop the ivory crisis, and including the poaching of rhinos in Africa. But even all these, I would say the total annual conservation grant, conservation funding that goes into Africa must be in the billions, right? But still, it's a pernicious problem. It still exists, right? And you see why? Because you will immediately see one of the reasons is that none of these conservation, solutions are looking at the people. And then if you go to Africa, you see some of the poorest people living in around some of the most wildlife-rich areas in the world. And the way they live is tragic. Most of them live in abject poverty. And then in the meantime, billions of dollars are spent to save elephants, using most of the high-tech technologies that are out there. Bring military people from other countries to come and, fight poachers. But no one is really addressing where do the poachers come from? Where do this network operate? How come the people around this wildlife don't see a value in this wildlife? Why is it that's not there? Right? I mean, I'll tell you, in Sri Lanka, yes, we do have some, issue. We have poaching. It's not that we don't. But I would say majority of the people would immediately be up in arms if some people went around slaughtering elephants the way they're doing in Africa. Like this poacher gangs infiltrate areas and operate with impunity amidst other communities in villages adjacent to protected areas and make these continuous forays into protected areas and slaughter elephants and slaughter rhinos and get their horns and ivory out of those places, right? Again, with no protest from the local people, right? I mean, how many African, communities have risen up in protest and said, oh, poachers operating here, or caught the poachers or handed them over? No. Why? Because for them, it's survival, right? I mean, for them, they don't see any of the conservation benefits coming to them. And this is it's a vital cog in this process. And especially today, because we live in a totally, totally different world than what it was 50, 100 years ago. I mean, there's no more pristine wilderness. I mean, with the elephants also, it's a case where we know that it's best is for, in any wildlife, the ideal situation is protected in situ, right? I mean, that's ideal. But as we see now, those ideal situations are slipping by very fast. No animal is safe anymore in the wilderness. That is a reality, actually. A lot of people don't see it yet. There are many, many forums, animal rights activists and animal welfare groups and all this lobbying going, like free the animal. Sometimes that freedom is the worst for the animal because that's where it meets its most challenges. The most risks for its survival are in the wilderness now. And anyone who had gone into the jungle and had observed wire snares, trap guns, pitfalls, poison bait with explosives, will soon realize jungle is a war zone. For any animal to survive in a jungle, it's a miracle now, considering the amount of attacks that are happening against them. Sometimes even I am surprised that even in the areas that we work in Sri Lanka, there's still some wildlife left because we know how grievous the poaching situation is, how pernicious it is, how insidious it is. It's because poaching and killing of wildlife happens every second, right? Every second, animal is dying somewhere, either caught in a snare or, shot by a trap gun or maimed by it or having eaten poison bait. Or there are elephants in Sri Lanka that are walking around with shattered jaws because they bit into food baited with explosives, which is now, is also which was becoming a huge issue. So what I'm saying is finally, the world is different now. I think going forward, how conservationists need to behave, think, and develop their programs will have to be very drastically different to how it has been so far. I mean, we really need to. We have no choice. It's not a choice anymore. From the very beginning, you have to pay attention to the human dynamics here. The human dimension in these issues.
You're absolutely right. The human dynamics are one of the main drivers of all of this, and we cannot divorce humans from the natural ecosystem. We are a part of it, and we are the cause of so much of what's going on, which I think brings us to a lot of the great work that you guys do. I know IEF has funded the Ella Friendly Bus program. You guys have Project Orange Elephant that works on human-elephant conflict. Do you want to talk about some of the projects and works that the Sri Lanka Wildlife Conservation Society is doing that addresses these human wildlife dynamics?
Yes. So, as I said, human-elephant conflict is I would say, one of the biggest environmental socioeconomic crises in Sri Lanka. In fact, you can say it's also a political issue now. In the mid 90s is when at the same time that I was founding the Sri Lanka Wildlife Conservation Society, uh, I was paying a lot of attention to this human-elephant conflict because I was, at that time, the internet has just come as a means of, information. And since I was in the US, I was very interested to know what was going on in Sri Lanka, and I would always do a search. And at least once a week, I would see a news item on human-elephant conflict. And then gradually dawned on me, this has become a huge issue, and by the time it came for me to do my summer field research, I was at the Center for Environmental Research and Conservation, acronym known as CERC at Columbia University. And I was, working on my degree in conservation biology. So it was essential for me to do a summer research program. So obviously I thought this is the best, I would like to go and do, look into this issue much more in detail. So in 97, I came and I went all over Sri Lanka, wherever it was possible to go at the time, considering there was a civil war going on. So there were sort of no-go areas in the north and east. But still, nevertheless, I went as close to those border areas as well, and found out, yeah, the human-elephant conflict was a huge issue. And at the time, there were efforts made by the government to address this. And one of their two main solutions at the time one was to drive elephants from one place to another, to translocate them. So either translocate individual animals by immobilizing them, or drive entire populations, sometimes numbering over 200 elephants, and from one place to maybe a nearby national park. And then they would build these long electric fences and even dig trenches to keep the elephants in. And most of these efforts were concentrated actually in the south, because some large sugar plantations were established in this region, and again shows a marked lack of interest of the development people that they allowed these sugar plantations to be established in elephant habitat, right? I mean, which is like asking for trouble, right? I mean, you go and set up sugar plantations next to, where elephants used to live. Obviously, you're creating conflict. Every effort that has been made to fence elephants into parks was unsuccessful. And I observed these fences. I stayed up late, and in one plantation, sugar plantation, they had like a military, organization to patrol these fences. I mean, they had their own security, regiments. They had, at certain places, they had set up watch huts from which they had villagers armed with lights, spotlights, and firecrackers, spend night monitoring this fence and ditch they had built, which was like 35 kilometers. And this is Yala National Park, one of our most renowned parks. I spent like 2 nights with these people, one going in their tractor that was patrolling the fence line, and then one night with the people in a watch hut. And both those nights, I saw elephants breaching the fence, crossing the ditch, and going. So they were very ineffective, and this sugar plantation company was, spending a huge amount of money to patrol this, fence line and maintain the security forces and or provide them with all these logistics to, do their work. Then this was the case where I went. I saw where I went. And finally, when I came to Vasgamo, where we are now based and where we have been operating for like past 25 years, the same thing. The national park had been fenced with the electric fence, but the entire fence was in disrepair. In some places you couldn't even see the fence, only some broken fence posts and some, wires lying around. So then only it came to me that probably this entire method, they're applying was wrong. First, like how, when you complete the fence, you know that you have all the elephants in the park, that you have driven all the elephants into the park. There's no way of knowing that, right? So you just, you assume all the elephants are in the park and you put a fence. So that was one, okay, weak point there. And then what happens is once you complete the fence, you have elephants in the park who wants to get out, and there are elephants outside who wants to now go in. This is just from the perspective of how it's going to work, right? If you have two sets of elephants on either side of the fence, which is what happens all the time. So the fence has been attacked from both sides. Then that's just that situation there. But then let's take a look at, what we know of elephant behavior. When we are developing measures, we have to take that into consideration, because we cannot change elephant behavior or how they live. What we can do is use that knowledge to come up with a solution. It's in within their behavior, because we can change human behavior. Now that's where, if you're going to change anything, any attitude or behavior, that's where we need to focus our attention on the people. With the elephants, we need to use their behavior to come up with a solution. Naturally, they will be averse to. And then elephants are naturally highly mobile. They range widely. Even, very few populations, I would say, have their range completely inside a park in Sri Lanka, because our parks are not big to begin with. And so I'm sure maybe, except for a handful of elephants, herds or populations, rest have their range overlapping with areas outside the park. And this has been proven many times by studies that were done, that our elephants, nearly 60 to 70% of our elephants are ranging outside the protected area, especially the national parks. Taking all that into consideration, my suggestion was, let's put the fence where we don't want elephants to go. Let's put the fence where we don't want elephants to go. The concept was called fencing elephants out. So against fencing elephants in. So let's put the fences where we don't want elephants to go, and let the elephants go wherever they want to go. No need to unnecessarily restrict them from going into areas which are very essential for their survival. Where they have food, where they have water and habitat. So rather, we put the fence around the villages, and let's train the villagers to take care of the fence, right? So this way, we have the fence where it really is effective, and we also have the manpower now to take care of this fence, right? Otherwise, you have like 50 kilometers of electric fence going along a park boundary, and no one to take care of it as well, because 50 kilometers is a long stretch by any means to manage, and it's just burdening whatever few park personnel that are there now to manage an electric fence as well, and they don't even have the means to do it. You can't walk 50 kilometers checking an electric fence. You need the means to do it. It should be at least be provided with a vehicle, at least a motorcycle, to traverse the entire length of the fence and check it, which were never provided. So, and that's another reason. So all of these factors coming in is the thing. So I came up with the concept, let's fence elephants out, and let's put the fence where we don't want elephants to go. So in 1998, I presented this at 2 international elephant forums, as well as to my university at Columbia. In 98, there was a Asian Elephant regional conference in Colombo that was organized by the Biodiversity and Elephant Conservation Trust. That same year, the Society for Conservation Biology, they had their conference in Sydney, Australia. And one of the side events was a human-elephant conflict workshop. So I presented this idea at these two, forums, and then of course there was a lot of interest, and I got a grant from the Wildlife Trust in '98 to do a pilot. Okay, now proof of concept. Show us, whether this works. So the first fence, the first community electric fence was built. We started construction in '98 and completed by '99. And then in 2002, the US Fish and Wildlife gave a second grant to set up another fence in the adjoining village, adjoining village to this. And then in 2003, IEF had its conference in Sri Lanka. And I would say it was one of the biggest conferences, with a very big turnout, over 200 delegates, and very, very successful conference. But most importantly, that conference gave us the means to show people who had already funded us, plus potential funders, what we are doing in our project sites. Because normally you don't have that opportunity, right? It's always you're sending reports and sending photos. Or if you meet them at a conference, they learn it through your presentations. But here it's like seeing is believing, right? I mean, as they say in that old saying, the proof of the pudding is eating it, right? So like that, it was a great opportunity for us. So, all of these people came and saw what we were doing. And so that started our first relationship with the IEF. IEF subsequently funded a few more projects, our Field Scouts program and, other programs that we did, actually to bring more community involvement into our projects. So the Field Scouts program itself was another innovative idea where we created these teams of rural youth that we recruited and trained to, act as our, field assistants, to be our liaisons with the villagers, coordinators. So thereby they could see a direct benefit, a direct involvement. And through that process, edify themselves, create awareness in them, how, about the value of what they have. So that was a very successful program for us, which really helped to, create a paradigm shift in the areas that, the area we were working, and garner more support from the locals for the conservation work we are doing. Because now they could see, because through the conservation process, they've also benefited directly, not in some, elusive way, but directly, the issues with elephants were being resolved, their youth were getting opportunities to develop, as well as gain employment, as well as the opportunity to go, broaden their horizons in a way, because many of the Field Scouts now have moved on to become nurses, teachers, police officers, railway station masters, because of the, great, capacity building they got, like great training and, skills they learned, gave them a huge advantage when it came to broadening their horizons and moving on, right? I mean, we don't want them to be Field Scouts forever. The idea was to create people with a value, people who will move, one day when they leave, they will leave with a value of this, assets they have taken for granted before. And as a result, we have a, educated, committed, responsible steward who would always be a spokesperson for elephant conservation and for any other conservation issue. And as we continued, so we realized that fences have their limitations as well. You can't apply fences everywhere. Then, as the years went by, we see an increase in traffic, in every form of traffic. And there are more tuk-tuks now going through the corridor, more motorcycles, trucks to buy produce. And of course, over the years, the populations have increased through birth, through marriage, through immigration, through settlement. So obviously, like anywhere else in the world, human populations are increasing, even though they are rural, communities. So here it's the same thing. And gradually, by 2013, we saw that there were increasing conflicts now. And most of it was initiated by people, because now you had people who had never lived with elephants moved into this area. And of course, they are terrified of the elephants because, for them, the only big animal they would have met on the street before would have been a cow, like a stray cow. But now, there are elephants on either side and sometimes on the road, and they have to stop and wait till it moves. And these people just didn't have the required experience to deal with this. Nor were they, nor did anyone take any, effort to train these people or, teach them how to live or whatever, because that's the way it is. So what these people started doing was they would start to harass the elephants. They started lighting firecrackers. They would go in these tuk-tuk convoys with strobe lights and air horns blaring, raising their engines. And then when 2014 swung by, things have really declined to a point where now people were coming with guns and shooting the elephants. Now the elephants are aggressive because of all the harassments they're undergoing. Now earlier school children who used to walk through the corridor can't now even cross the corridor because there are elephants there. And if there are bull elephants, and they become very aggressive because, unlike herds that the mere indication of danger, they disappear because they are, wary of their young. But bulls are different. It's very difficult to chase a bull elephant. And especially if you're behaving aggressively, the chances are the bull will also respond in an aggressive manner. And this came to a point where they were charging people. School children couldn't go to school. And then finally, people were coming with guns and shooting elephants. And then school children are escorted by their parents carrying guns. So like basically the entire situation has declined where it was like a war zone. And many times our staff who are monitoring from the tree huts that we have there had to intervene, like when people came with guns. So fortunately, we are known in the area, because we have been always working with these communities. So we managed to sort of, subdue the situation and, and send them off, but not all the time, because sometimes we come and we see the blood splashes on the ground and on the grass and on bushes where elephants are being already shot. So then we realized we really had to do something here. So you can't put an electric fence there. That's not a solution there in a situation like that. What we did was we had all this data from 2002. So we looked at it, and then we immediately saw when we analyzed the data that the pedestrian traffic was the cause. So over the course of years, the traffic in the area in general has increased. And out of that, nearly 70% was pedestrian traffic. Now, what do? We can't ask these people to go and buy a vehicle, right? Or, carpool, that's not going to work. And we had to come up with a solution. So then only we realized, okay, what if we provide these people with a safe conveyance just to get to the corridor? I mean, that's where the problem is. I mean, the whole thing is this section, which is about, probably 2 kilometers in total distance. But this is where it was intense. Why? Because people felt so unsafe walking through this corridor, either walking or in a bicycle. Then only we came up with the idea, let's start daily friendly bus service. Let's, initiate a bus service for these communities so that the children, actually the main focus was the children, to provide the school children. Otherwise, these children are walking 7 kilometers every day to school and back, some even as long as 12, 15 kilometers. So at least, this way we can provide them with a safe conveyance to get them from home to school and then from school back, back home. So that's how the Daily Friendly Bus initiative got, developed.
These people need a safe transportation.
Now hopefully this problem will be addressed by the Daily-Friendly Bus.
It started as a concept, like from a tree hut, watching children going to school and elephants on either side, and these kids are terrified. So today, that era of violence in the corridor would be something of the past, and we are stepping into a new era of creating coexistence.
Future generations will not forgive us if we let these elements wither away and become extinct. So it is our responsibility, the responsibility of humanity, to preserve this magnificent and gentle creature.
I wanted to thank you so much for all of your thoughts. These are, I think IEF's supporters and viewers are really going to find this all fascinating. And I think that they will really enjoy seeing the great work that you do.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. Take this opportunity to say thank you not only to you, but also to JB and the rest of the IEF board, for the support we have received over the course of all these years.
Obviously, given the current global pandemic, we have no idea what is in store for any of us.
Definitely.
But we
That's
definitely know conservation will keep going, and we will keep going. And we look forward to working together for many years to come.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Sarah. You be safe. Okay.
Thank you, you too. Thank you so much, Ravi. Thank you for your time.